How's it going, everyone? Geoff Chrysler of A Detail Enthusiast here for the next installment of my BN1 restoration. As you can see, I got the rear axle in. Didn't take me too long, actually. It went pretty smoothly. I had already previously built up the entire rear axle, so it was very heavy. You know, the whole diff is in it and both brake assemblies are fully attached, and I even filled it up with some fresh oil before I installed it. And the way that I did it was, well, first of all, I wanted to protect the freshly painted frame and chassis from any scratches, and when you're trying to maneuver something this big and heavy, it was bound to happen. So what I used was, instead of just rags or blanket, I used some of this, it's 1/8 inch thick neoprene rubber, and I just laid it on top of all the frame members in there and wrapped some plastic wrap around it to keep it in place, and that saved my paint. I ended up getting this all in there without any scratch paint, which is amazing. And what I did to get it in there, I came in from the left-hand side. As it says in the manual, you're supposed to go in and out through the left-hand side. And what I did was I just jacked it up on my rolling jack over there, with the jack underneath the diff, carefully balancing it, and then I used this little cart here with an axle stand up as high as it needed to go, and of course the axle just sat in here with the back plate right against it. And as I carefully maneuvered it in, every time I had to go up and over the spring and up and over the frame, I'd just lift it through from the other side and then back down onto my rolling jack, and I just pulled it along, and this cart just followed me along on wheels. And it worked really well. I was able to get it in myself. It took me about 25 minutes maybe. And of course, the axle being fully weighted like this, it was a cinch getting this U-bolts into the springs. I just had to put this jack underneath the leaf spring and jack up the leaf spring, and the axle stayed put. The car stayed put because of the weight of the axle, and it was really simple. So there you go. She's all bolted in place, and of course you've got the little aluminum tapered spacer with the little plastic piece that goes under it, with the taper pointed towards the back as it should. So that's all nicely bolted in place, again with its original hardware, with the black phosphate on all the nuts and fasteners. And she's looking really good. One thing I noticed I had wrong, I had put this brake line, I had it backwards so that it was actually crossing over where this bump stop would hit. If it ever bumped, which I'm sure it will, it would have pinched the line. So glad I caught that, got that changed over. So yeah, I had just copied my original brake lines, but they were off of the axle when I copied them, so lucky I noted that. And of course, these are my original, the early style bump stops. Later BN1s and BN2s had a different arrangement where it had a cone coming off of the axle here. But the early cars looked like this. And those rubbers are my original rubbers. I just cleaned them up and they look great, because you can't get those. At least the new ones don't look like the original. And over on this side, here you can see the panhard rod. Installed the right hand side first with new bushings, and of course black phosphate hardware, the nuts, but the big flat washers were zinc as original. And you install it on the right hand first, and then install it into this bracket, which is a separate piece, and then you drop the bracket in place and hook it up with the U-bolt. So pretty simple. And oh yeah, and of course for installation, because these back plates are really close, tight clearance, I did remove the battery switch just to get it out of harm's way. And yeah, that was quite essential for this installation, so I can put it in again now. And of course there's my fuel pump mounted. I've still got to make the fuel line. That's getting very close to being finished in here. Oh, and of course I was going to proceed and hopefully take these casters off and mount the rear shocks in, but as it turns out I've got to get new shock links here. I went to start installing my original and the stud inside of it started to spin, so they're no good. So I've got new ones ordered and they're just on the way, so I'll have to wait until they arrive before I can continue on with the shocks. Now I've also been working on making up the passenger side wood block setup. This is correct for early BN1s had this set up on both sides, and then once they switched to the adjustable seat and non-adjustable steering, which my car is some of the first of, so of course it's got adjustable tracks just on the driver's side now, and but the passenger side maintained the earlier style, which is a pair of, this is a 3/4 inch thick and a 5/16 thick wood block. And of course it goes on top of the black metal spacer plate. Of course tar paper should be down on the floor first, and then this gets layered. So this 3/4 piece will have some quarter T-nuts in it, and T-nuts, and then bolts that go down through the floor with nuts on the other end. So you bolt this in place, and then this goes over top with these larger holes clearing the bolt heads, and then the seat pan goes in and it bolts through these little holes into the T-nuts that are inside of this. So it's quite a tricky sandwiched assembly, and of course for seat adjustment you've got a choice between using these two holes or those two holes, so that's your choice of adjustment right there. Now another thing I've gotten into today is installing the pedals. I got the put in the shaft for the brake and clutch pedals, and then just fed the pedals themselves on with their little rubber boots that they have. And yeah, just fed them up in there and linked it up to the brake master cylinder here with its return spring and pin with a cotter pin, and then hooked up the beginnings of the clutch linkage here. As you can see, there's those links there, and their cotter pins in, and then there'll be another link coming back like this, joining to the side of the gearbox to move the clutch. And then moving on up, this is the beginnings of the throttle linkage hooked up to the throttle pedal inside there, and it comes up here and works this little pivot. Now there'll be another shaft coming up here to the throttle position relay for the overdrive, and then of course one going over here to the carburetors. So still got to get those hooked up. Need some more really tiny cotter pins for this tiny one. And that's looking really good though. It's nice to get those kind of things installed before I put the drivetrain in, just so they're done. And of course on the inside here you can see there's the dip switch on the left there, which I should point out comes through the floor. It doesn't mount on the inside like some people think. I know the hole makes it look like it should do that, but they were actually mounted on the back side, just with the switch coming through. And the pedals are joined up. Gas pedal with these little shorty screws that hold it in place. So that's all looking really good. Okay, and next I'm going to get into installing the handbrake. So here I've got the cable. It's all cleaned and ready to go. It's my original cable. And then here's my original handle, re-chromed with the just the zinc plating on the lower part. And here's all my replated hardware. So I can just go through it and start reassembling. So you can see here the cable. I've had to thread it into that little bracket, and now I'm tightening down this nut to secure it. So that'll be the cable that the handle goes into, and the handle will come through here with its little lever. So that's the handle installed. You can see I got a little clevis pin in there with a cotter pin, and the line goes back into the axle area. And here's the handle all done up. So over here, comes from out from under here and sneaks under the battery tray here, and then around and over there to the axle where it will link up. So here you can see it's come from the middle there, under here, and I'm just gonna grab it here, and it's got to go right into that little eyelet. So here's the nut. Let's take that off, and you can see that I've threaded it through, and now I just gotta do the nut onto here. And then this guy is gonna link up with this, with one of these clevises and pins. And there we go. So I got the nut locked on there, and then threaded the clevis onto the shaft with the nut, and then put the pin in with the cotter pin. So that's all ready to go. There she is, the little grease joint so you can grease the whole line. And of course that'll be trapped like that underneath of the battery tray. So we'll just give it a test. Okay, so here it's off in the lowered position, and yeah, wheels are freewheeling, and that's good. Good. Man, not bad for first go. It doesn't even feel like I need to adjust it. Wow. Not bad. Put that back down. Yeah, great. Now on top of putting in the rear axle, I've also started assembling some of the steering components by first installing the steering column here, which if you follow my blog, I rebuilt this completely last year and installed it with the little aluminum spacer blocks, and this is all the original black phosphate plated hardware, and of course fit it through. Those are the correct style of steering column grommets that Roger Moment made available years ago. So here it is coming through on this side, and as it goes here in the column. So hopefully can start working on getting the dash in now. I wanted to get that column in before I did anything with the dash and the fresh paint of the dash. So proceeding along the front here, here's the idler box. Again, I rebuilt this with new oil seals on both of them and new dust seals here in the dark gray color. And again, topped it off with some fresh oil. And here is, I've just got the one arm in so far. I'm going to put in the coil springs today as well. So once those are in place, I can also put the side arms in. And of course, all of my steering arms are the correct early BN1 style. So they've got the little, I don't know if you can see it there, little adjustable ends on them, which later ones had a different style. And of course, I got to put new cotter pins in there now that these are done up. And these are the proper boots as well. So coming along really nicely. And of course, once I get the dash in place, I can feed through the wiring for the horn trafficator unit down through this center stator tube. So that should be fun. There's a number of wires that I have to fit down through this tiny little hole. And they'll come out here and link up to the harness down here. So here you can see I'm tightening up the spring. I've made sure I've got my 2-inch spacer here in the top, and I've just got a couple pieces of ready rod front and back, and I'm just tightening them down a little bit at a time evenly and compressing the spring. And once we get it up there, I pop in this bracket and put in the bolts from the top with the nuts on the bottom and tighten them up, and then change out the ready rod ones for the proper bolts. And as you can see, this side's already done and went really well, nice and safe. Got the bolts all in properly. And once that's all in there, and I leave that 2-inch spacer block in there until the engine is in and the car is properly weighted, then that'll just pop out of there. But until then, we keep the spacers in, and because it's all under pressure now. And if I were to pop that spacer out, the whole thing would come crashing down and squash that rubber block, and so we gotta keep it all weighted. And now that it's at this position, I can go ahead and tighten up all my fulcrum pins and get it all set in this position. Okay, so that's the front suspension all fully assembled. So after installing the springs, as I showed you, I continued on with installing the rest of the steering arms, and retapped all the threads on these, and got the castle nuts all lined up. I just have to put in the cotter pins, but the holes are all lined up, so they're ready to go. And I put in the brake flex lines as well, so that's all hooked up and ready. So it's really looking good. I can basically put the wheels on now. So I hope you've enjoyed watching my progress. Please feel free to subscribe or comment or ask questions. There's lots more to come, so stay tuned.